Hey folks, this is Vince with Dad's Gaming Addiction, and today we're going to take a quick look at Star Trek the game. And quote-unquote, it's a strategic game of logic, trivia, and chance that will engage the senses. Okay, just read my review for my thoughts on that. Anyway, this is a game for 2 to 6 players, ages 10 and up, with the average play time being about 60 minutes. Let's just take a quick look at the components and see how the game is played. As far as the components are concerned, the game includes a number of these trivia cards. And there's actually 5 different decks, if you can believe it. There is the Warp 1 deck, Warp 2, Warp 3, Warp 4, and the Docking deck. Basically, these just indicate the varying levels of difficulty. Warp 1 being the easiest, while Docking is the hardest. Now, on the back of the Warp 1 through Warp 4 cards are 6 trivia questions, one for each number of the die. As players move their piece around the board, they'll be asked trivia questions, and look at the number on the die to determine what question will be read. Now, the game also includes a number of these Awards of Valor tokens. Players will be able to earn these by towing friendly ships back to starbase as they need it, and then spend these in order to restore ship systems and the like. You've got 1 movement die, 6 player pieces, a number of these planet citations. Basically, players are going to be traveling to different planets in this game that are on the board, and answering trivia questions to try and get these planet citations to put into their status consoles along the bottom here. Now, you've also got 5 spaces along the top of the status console to place a token for each of the 5 different ship systems. You've got 2 warp engines, a phaser, an impulse engine, and a force field. Bugs the hell out of me. It should be a shield, but whatever. Game setup is simple. Each player receives a status console and one of each of the 5 ship systems. You've got phaser, force field, impulse, warp engine, and warp engine. Players also will choose a color sphere and place it into the center of the board where the starbase is housed. The gameplay mechanics aren't all that complicated. You'll roll a die at the beginning of your turn, move that many spaces, and then you'll be asked a trivia question. The type of trivia question that you'll be asked all depends on how far along in the game you currently are, and I'll get to that in a minute. But basically, you're going to be trying to get your starship to each of the planets in the game. There's 1 on each of the 4 corners, and whenever you land on this yellow space and you answer a trivia question correctly, you'll gain that planet citation to put into your status console. And the object is to gain all 4 citations and return to starbase, and the first player that manages to do that will win the game. Now, there are a few things worth noting. Whenever you do move and answer a trivia question correctly, you'll be allowed to roll the die and move again. You could technically win the entire game on your very first move without anyone else taking a turn. Yeah, just think about that. It's very unlikely because the questions do tend to get tougher as the game progresses, but it is possible. In addition to that, there are some spaces on the board that players will need to pay attention to. For example, this one here says go to white. If you happen to land on this, you'll have to fast travel over to white over here. Some other spaces like lose warp or lose phaser, lose engine, different things like that. So you want to try and avoid these spaces if at all possible. These spaces with the arrows on them force you to move in that particular direction. You've also got like these fast travel corridors, for lack of a better term, here. If you happen to enter from the top, you'll go all the way to the end. If you happen to enter from the side, you can go down the corridor and then leave at some point before you reach the end of the corridor. So there are a few spaces to look at. You've also got the Klingon and Romulan neutral zones. Movement in these zones is reduced by half. Now, I mentioned earlier that there were 5 different trivia decks. The deck that you'll use whenever you're moving all depends on how many planets you've managed to get citations for already. If you're just leaving starbase and on your way to your first planet, it doesn't matter which one you pick. But yeah, if you're on your way to your first planet, you'll read the warp. Someone else will read off to you the Warp 1 questions. If you're on your way from your first planet to your second planet, someone will read you the Warp 2 questions. If you're on your way from the second planet to the third planet, the Warp 3 questions, and 3 to 4 is the Warp 4 questions. And finally, when you're on your way back to starbase, someone else will read you the docking questions. Because this is a trivia game, I just want to quickly go over a few of the questions featured in the Warp 1 and the Warp 4 deck, just to give you an idea of the range of difficulty associated with these different decks. Now, the Warp 1 deck has questions like, does the USS Enterprise ever land on planet surfaces? Another question might be, what is Mr. Scott's first name? So some basic questions that most Star Trek fans should know. Then you get to these Warp 4 questions, a little bit harder. In the episode Patterns of Force, what component of the transponders do Kirk and Spock use to free themselves? It's been a while, but I would not have gotten rubidium crystals. In the episode Spacey, what planet does Kirk leave Khan and his party? Now, because I've watched Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan so many times, I know it's Ceti Alpha 5. In the episode The Mark of Eden, how much time does Kirk say he is missing from his memory? Really? So some of these questions are a little difficult around the later parts of the game. Luckily, you don't need to answer most of them in order to move around the board. You just simply lose your turn. And there you have it. This is just a very brief look at Star Trek the game. I didn't cover all of the rules found in the manual, but this should just give you the general idea as far as how the game flows. You can check out my review at www.dadsgamingaddiction.com, or you can click on the link in the below description that'll take you there as well. This is Vince, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.